Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's wonderful. The number of men out there are identifying with women, as there's a line outside the bathroom. Good experience. Let's begin. We use this opportunity to introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Hubbard.
I'm Paul.
Mike.
Ding Hao.
George. I'm Carl.
Tim. I'm Scott. I'm Bob. I'm Lenny.
Randy.
Paul.
Peter.
Larry.
Mark.
Jack.
Bill.
Max. Michael. Darren. Kay. Nicholas. Michael. Michael. Todd. Bill.
Paul.
George. Clint.
Robert.
Peter.
Bob.
Steve.
Ray.
John.
Jim.
Well, welcome this morning. Is there anyone here for the first time? Your name again?
Michael.
From where?
San Francisco.
Right here.
I've heard of that place.
And you didn't get lost. It's wonderful. And where else?
Scott.
Scott, welcome. Yeah, good to have you today.
Mike. Here.
And Cindy also, welcome. Wow, yeah, Matt.
From Montreal.
From Montreal. Wow, welcome. Good to have you today. Don, you have a guest?
Yes. Introduce himself.
George from Minneapolis.
The big boy can introduce himself. Welcome, George. Good to have you. Again, welcome to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. It's my privilege this morning to introduce you and welcome on behalf of our Sangha, Tempel Smith. The last time you spoke here, I was sort of facilitating, I think, because we spent time working on your name, right? Tempel. Tempel will be speaking on Metta in the mind. He's been practicing meditation since 1989, was ordained a monk in 97 in Burma. He does daily work and daily practice work and active with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. He also has taught meditation and teaches meditation and Buddhist psychology. He's the founder of the West Coast Teen Meditation Retreat. He's also founder of Base House, an acronym for
the Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement.
An international community dedicated to socially engaged Buddhism. Temple, it's a privilege again to welcome you.
Thank you. It really is a privilege to be back. I enjoyed my time here last time. I was really delighted to get another opportunity to come meet you all. Today I'd like to talk about Metta and how Metta is developed and expressed. Sure. Today I'd like to talk to you about Metta. And please, if my voice goes down, please raise your hand and I'll chin it back up. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have practiced Metta meditation? And how many of you who raised your hand enjoy Metta meditation? Okay. More than half. And how many people are new to actual meditation? Is there anybody here who's visiting for the first time? Okay, thanks. Oh, you're scratching. So I practiced as a monk in Burma back in 1998. And I've come back and I've tried to share my experiences, try to help make a bridge over. And I find that I've sort of developed a bit of a niche in Dharma teaching, where I have a lot of love for what I learned over in Burma. And I try to communicate Burmese and classical Buddhism, Theravadan Buddhism, and try to be careful about interpreting it too much from a Western model. So when I do that, I try to be clear, because some of our interpretations are very helpful. But sometimes I think we might be missing a bit of the core of what's being developed over there, and that gets a little bit confusing. So a friend of mine just recently called me a fundamentalist, and I was really taken back. And we're still trying to unpack what she meant by that. But I have a real love for the classical teachings, but I also know to practice them well, they need some guidance. That often, just as they are presented, it's a little bit opaque. It's not so clear to see what the practice is about. And so, metta is one of my favorite topics, mostly because I hated it so much for the first 5 years that I was introduced to Buddhism. I was raised in a college town. My parents are professors, and metta just seemed like the New Age corruption of Buddhist wisdom. It seemed to be where you would go to hang out when you couldn't actually deal with the harsh, clear truth of reality. Tells you a lot about what my childhood might have been like. But I was yearning for it. I really was yearning for it. But as it was presented, I always reacted against it. Usually women will lead metta, and they'll put their own spin on it. And the first woman that actually taught me metta really had a very New Age persona. And I didn't like it, and I really resisted the actual practice. But after my first 3-month retreat, when I saw how dry, brittle, critical my Vipassana practice was, I realized that I was starving for the development of metta, and I was humbled enough to start from scratch and go talk to people who had practiced it. So my next 3-month retreat, I practiced metta for 3 months, solid. I learned a lot about metta practice. And then also over in Burma, I practiced in a monastery where people practice metta meditation a lot. And I got to see people who go very deeply into metta, into these deep states of concentration that are completely about metta. And to do that, you really have to target metta very carefully to go into these deep states. You can't be fuzzy about it, because you won't really sink into the strength of what metta is. So I want to describe some of that and give you what I think is kind of a tuned-in, a little more precise idea of what metta practice is. How's my voice? Great. Metta is often translated as loving kindness. And the image that brings up for me is often sort of a joyous, happy, full pouring out of love. That's close, but not the experience that I've had in metta, and that's not usually where people go into deep states of concentration around metta. Some people are yearning for love. We're so starved of connection in this culture that we're yearning to be just bathed in love. And we want to be good at love, so we want to bathe people, throw a lot of love on them. So our first encounter with metta might be trying to cultivate this ocean of love that we can throw out. and becoming really kind. And kind it's almost like nice. It's a very tricky word, because being kind all the time is not necessarily kind. To be pleasant all the time is not necessarily kind. So for me, loving kindness, I just put the wrong spin on it. And the word metta is actually very close to the Pali word metta, which is friend and friendship. So for me, it was more important to tune into what are the aspects of friendship that I already knew and were already important to me. That's what this one teacher said, even in the very beginning, that none of us could survive without metta. So you all have metta already going in your life. It is what is good about all of your best relationships. So that's the good news up front. It's not something that we have to learn from the outside or dig really deep to find. It's just hooking up what metta is to what your experience is that will help you ID how much you already know about metta and how to practice it and increase it. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody lost here? Don't want to go too far. Okay. So when I think about my best friendships, there's a very deep acceptance in them. People have really grown to love me for who I am. They've really seen me very deeply. They've known me for a long period of time. And what they say after a long period of time is, I still want to show up. You know, I've seen a lot of you, and basically I like it, and I want more of that. That willingness to connect, that willingness to offer friendship, deep friendship, the loyalty of friendship, is actually closer to how metta matures and can mature into deep concentration than the bubbly, warm, frothy love, sort of the puppy love, the ecstatic love. With that foundation, you can have ecstatic love. But ecstatic love is not so grounded that you can stay up there. So it tends to be a high that you come out of. And if you're IDing love and metta as this sort of high pouring out capacity, then when you're not there, you'll be thinking your heart's not full of metta, not full of this friendship. The Buddha described metta as the absence of hate. It's just, that's where it begins. And that's why it is such a broad capacity. It's the absence of hate. It's the absence of judgment. It's the connection that you can make with somebody, seeing them, welcoming them in, wanting to know them better, not being critical, but curious. And so that there's a curiosity. I still want to know you. There's still parts about you I don't get, but I want to. That would be sort of the lifelong friendship, one where there's still mystery and curiosity. No matter what you discover, it's still interesting. So metta begins with just taking hate out of your heart and all the expressions of hate. The numbness, the boredom, the criticism. Anything that blocks you from your first direct encounter with somebody else. That's the broad field and the foundation of metta. And then on that, you can go many places. You can laugh with your friends. You can hang out with your friends. You can work on projects with your friends. You can do sports with your friends. You can not see them for 10 years and come back and reconnect. When you have that as the foundation of what metta is, a lot of expression can happen on top of that. But if you take a particular expression of metta as the center of it, it doesn't spin well around that center, because The times that feel more flat feel like an absence of metta. And that's actually starting with this great platform of non-criticism is really where metta takes off. And that's often what metta in these deep states of concentration are like. There's a lot of equanimity. There's a lot of fully seeing and receiving somebody. When you do equanimity practice as a mode of relationship of the heart, there's no leaning in. There's no leaning in to make a connection. It's a perfect intimacy that allows someone to be exactly as they are. When you're just slightly off from that, it can be a little bit cold. It can be a little bit non-committed. It's like, okay, I love you for who you are. Go do what you're going to do. That's a little bit like equanimity, but it's detached. So metta is a little more warm than just flat equanimity that would take somebody in with intimacy, but leave them feeling seen, but still standing on their own feet, which is the depth of equanimity. I'm standing on my own feet, and this person's willing to let me do what I have to do, and they're going to still support me, but really by giving me space. Metta is warmer than that. And they clean each other up, because if it's too warm, often you're starting to come off your own stable center, and you're starting to lean into the relationship. You're starting to lean into results. You're starting to really lean into the joy of the relationship and forming yourself around that. So really understanding the open-handedness of equanimity and the warmth of metta, they can't develop without each other. And so that's when you know equanimity, just loving a beach at sunset because it is perfect. And then looking around and knowing every moment of your life is actually that beautiful and perfect. That's equanimity. It's very intimate. It's very warm. It's not so much warm as it is clear. And it's very, very tolerant and just loving things as they actually are. And you almost don't want to even to get too close to it because you start to change it. So there's a real respect for things just as they are. Developing relationships with equanimity is important for keeping your metta practice and your metta relationships from being as passionate and as much of a roller coaster as they are when you don't ID the stability in metta and the way equanimity supports that. How's that piece?
Do you have an experience of how intimacy is understood in the East versus the West? Do you have an understanding how the West understands intimacy?
We're going through something we're in a part of a very long cycle, like a 200-year cycle of rationality right now.
Who's we?
The West.
Okay.
And I'm not sure we're done yet with individuality, but we're taking individuality to an extreme. And I hope it comes back around, but it's amazing how much more fragmented my sister's children's lives are than I had growing up. How little connection they have, how speedy it is. And there's a certain lack of depth. And people are getting more and more isolated in our culture. But we have a lot of investigation of what one being is. In Burma, they're born into a house where there are already 14 people of all ages, and they're never alone. And so the Westerners were all like, I want my own cabin, I want my own kuti, so I can practice and just get all this chaos down. And the Burmans like, I have to go into my own cabin, this is not so hot. And it's like, there won't be any noise. I was like, how do you meditate with 14 people around you? There's all that noise. And it's like, yeah, it's really grounding. And like, how do you sleep in a room with 14 people? It's like, oh, I'm just snug. And so their community orientation is really beautiful and strong, but they don't have, there are certain aspects of the practice that they're slow at. And that's actually individual investigation of themselves. And it's not a place their mind wants to go. Like our minds don't really, we're yearning for it, but we don't really want at this point to sleep with 5 people in the same room. Unless like we've handpicked them. And usually only for like a night or two. So that they're coming in with a lot more community-minded. Metta is actually very easy for them, which is a beautiful thing about being in their culture. But one of the things that is startlingly absent is individual empowerment and individual understanding.
Along the same lines, I was thinking this before, that question even is general subject of metta towards oneself, relationship with oneself, intimacy with oneself. And take it wherever you want to go. I mean, your own experience with that, or your understanding of Burmese experience with that, anything.
In the classical form of training in metta, you start with yourself just to get a sense of how deep one being is and precious one being is. And that's for Westerners, there's some problem there sometimes, but the classical form is you just say, okay, this is one being. And then you go to the very best person you can choose who's given you metta, who's given you this space to grow, this sort of loyalty that's unquestioned, loving who you actually are. And that might be a parent, a grandparent, or a teacher. So I started my metta practice with my father, and I did the first 5 weeks just on him. And then I hit a wall where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I actually had to go back to do metta practice for myself. And I realized it was easier for me to give metta to somebody else, but it wasn't a very deep metta because I really hadn't developed metta for myself. And then I spent the next 7 weeks doing metta for myself, and that was horrible. That was really horrible because I began to see how much criticism I had of myself, how hard I was on myself, how abandoning I was of myself. And what I wanted was that sort of ocean flowing of like, oh, I love myself. I wanted the fruit of it all. But what I got was down to this platform. If I could just not criticize myself, if I could really see myself for who I am, let it all hang out. And that's actually a better place to love oneself than having this zippity-doo-dah happiness. I love myself, because you can't stay there. That's very conditional. But if you have this broad sense of metta for yourself, then the zippity-doo-dah is great, but you're not identified with that sense of love. And you recognize your self-criticisms early on and recognize how useless they are.
Burmese, I'm curious.
The Burmese, they don't have self-criticism like we do. I mean, it's odd. And it could be there. It's just the culture they haven't accessed it. So nobody talks about it. Nobody kind of gets it. It might be like talking about psychology 300 years ago. It's like the ego, what are you talking about? So it might still be there, but you can't access these elements of conflict in them. So metta is very easy for them. It's a very natural thing in their culture.
Myself, I was grew up brother under Buddhism in Thailand. Very Burmese. As you described about metta, that able to accept you whatever you are. love you whatever you are. Especially when it comes to West, people just accept who you are, love who you are. I still have a hard time with that because I can accept whatever you are, but if your behavior going to harm someone else, how can you accept that?
Acceptance is the first step to real change. And acceptance is not where you end up. It's not a final place. So if I'm harming somebody and I could stop, chances are it's not a very deep pattern. It's just something I'm not aware of. But if I have a pattern around how I harm somebody or harm myself, I can't just change the top behavior. I really have to go into where that's coming from. And to go into it, you can't go into it hating it because you won't see the actual pattern. So you have to accept, sink in, see what's actually going on, and then going to those places often transforms. Just acceptance does transform the pattern. And if it does, if the pattern is really strong, you, with acceptance, try to bring in balance around the habit. But if you end up hating the habit, judging the habit, if it's a deep one, you won't get to lasting change.
You talk about me or you, that you have cycle that you're not able to bring on that cycle, either harm to yourself or harm to anyone. I'm talking about me being able to accept you.
Oh, yeah. Well, if
it's not,
it's the same thing, because if you've traced yourself and you know your own imperfections, if you've looked, then when you see me and my imperfections, start with somebody easy. Then you say, yeah, okay, they're trying hard, but they still have little quirks about them. And then you try somebody who's a little more challenging and say, yeah, okay, they're also trying, but they're a little bit off on this one thing. And then you go to somebody else and you keep working up to where you can look at a mass murderer and say, that mass murderer was a child at one point who was laughing, who was delighted by an ant, who ran into his mother or father's arms with glee, who cried at a skinned knee. So there is a being in there who has memories of being innocent, probably displaying strong emotions, maybe strong tendencies early on, if you could actually track backwards, I'm not sure. But there is somebody, and then circumstances, either internally or externally, began to shape that person's life to end them up where they are. If you have real compassion for yourself and look at how hard it is for you to change yourself even when you're trying, to then look at someone who's done the most heinous crimes and offer them the same theory, the same system that they've been shaped. That doesn't mean then that they don't need to be stopped. They do need to be stopped because they're hurting themselves. I mean, as much as I can say, like, you're your own person, you do what you want to do. If you're really hurting yourself and hurting other people, it's like, okay, this is not about fine-tuning. You really need to drop that gun. And you really need to maybe go behind bars right now, because there's just not a system in place that's going to keep you from hurting yourself and others. I wish we had that. And then with compassion, like we have a prison project, with compassion, looking at each person as a valuable being, seeing that there's a lot of social conditionings in everybody who's in prison that have made them where they are. And there might be personal things. There might be abuse. There might be chemical imbalances. There might be certain predilections that. But when you account for where everybody is, even the worst people in prison, you can have compassion for it. And then you find some beautiful people in prison. So it just melts the boundaries and judgments around other people, but it shouldn't make you passive. It's the best place to start actually making change.
Yeah, I don't understand what you described that. As a human being, how far you can actually accept that. Yeah, I'm working on it, but
Great.
is that easy?
No, it's not.
It depends on what case. But some cases you just cannot bear it. How could I able to accept or compassion with that? Therefore, if I'm not able to send out compassion to you, I just shut it off. Bye. You your own. That's how I do.
That might be temporarily skillful means. If you're cultivating hate with somebody, you might recognize that you're not able to be that skillful and transform the hate. So you're actually just cultivating hate with somebody and judgment. And your mindfulness isn't learning about the pattern, you're just repeating a pattern. So to block somebody out does save them and you, but you don't end the relationship. That's not possible to end relationships. We think it is. And so don't end the relationship, but say, I'm just not in a place right now where I can work with you skillfully. If you're a parent, you don't have that option. You have a deep responsibility. But you might walk out of the room for a sec if a child is older. You might breathe more before you go in. You might set yourself up so that you do have the best shot of being as skillful as possible, and then really compassionate for human limitations. Thanks. Let's go through that. You first.
I guess because of the way life works, at times it seems like that is something you can achieve. But I'm practicing in Zen tradition.
Yeah.
So my manner is zazen is to breathe and to let go of even self-evaluation. And it's a process that seems to me rather than an end goal to achieve it. And I wonder if you could just talk about how we might, about practicing metta in the Zen. I have some ideas.
Do you know that Zen story about the woman who makes a hut for a monk and he practices for 20 years and she supports him? And then she wants to test what's happened for 20 years and he sends a call girl into his cabin and she tries to seduce him and he says, I am like a cold stone. And she burns his cabin and say 20 years and you're cold. That's, here's this person and you didn't make a connection. I would say that people who have gone very far in Zen have found warmth. But, I'm sorry, this is really illegal to say. One of the things I feel in American Zen is that the form works well for Japanese culture because there are certain themes in Japanese culture that work well in that form. And I think that given our tremendous individualism, that using that form, it's not actually a critique of Zen. The same thing in Vipassana. If you use a Burmese form, if you're really tight on how the Burmese do it, or how the Japanese do it, and you take it into our culture, people can go very far and not address a place that they're deeply suffering. Because that theme of suffering isn't so problematic in the culture it came from. And what they're trying to do to balance people out in their culture, brought over to our culture, it just doesn't work so well. But when people go long enough in any tradition, their path, it's like a self-cleaning oven. It just starts to burn off the things that don't belong in the heart. And the worst thing is when we fight that process because we're trying to be true to the form and don't actually be true to the wisdom. But that's hard to know what's the form and what's the wisdom.
I think that's really changing in my experience of your faith.
Yeah.
But it is loosening, right? Or it's okay. So I played a ceremony yesterday and I'm not supposed to talk. It was a very dear friend of mine. He's leaving, and maybe the reverend, so to speak, turned to me and I said, oh, I see it's not supposed to be talking. And I said, sometimes the form says I should be talking. I had to say that.
There's a great story about this one. My dad did Zen for a while, and there's this one guy in his community that was really quite anal retentive, and he liked that about Zen because he could be as anal retentive as he wanted, and it wasn't going to cause friction, and so it wasn't showing up on the radar. Probably everybody felt it, but it's just like we don't really have a thing for working on this because it just doesn't cause friction in the Zen. I mean, it does, but... And so this one guy was trying to out another student when the teacher came in. And so there's one sloppy guy, and he said, what do you think of students that never show up on time, don't clean up after themselves, sit kind of in a sloppy form? And the teacher said, they're probably experiencing a lot of freedom. And that guy just turned red. So if you go very far in all these traditions, wisdom does develop, capacity does develop. I mean, I got to a place where my self-righteousness around metta being new agey just collapsed. And it was really my own fear and estrangement from that whole field of relating that I was covering with my brilliant intellectual mind. And the one thing I want to really, I'll get to your question in a sec, but one thing I really want to leave with is that I really want you guys to look at your best relationships, the ones that have meant the most to you. Not so much like the obsessive love. There's a lot in there to look at too, but the people who really have your back, the people who have come through for you. I know it can be hard when we sometimes scan and we don't find those people, but we all have them. You just cannot, it's the American myth that anybody is self-made. And so scan through and look, just recover what's already good in your relationships. And that is metta. You already have metta. It's not supposed to look too different. And when you develop authentic metta, it looks a lot like what you already have. It's your authentic expression of metta. You don't have to become somebody who's all loving. You take what is already loving about you. However, what word would you use? And that's what your expression of metta is going to be. And so sometimes the training of metta is difficult because people throw in ways that they've accessed their own sense of love. But there's a lot of permission in metta practice to discover what is true for you already about metta, about this friendship, this deep loyalty, caring, willing to suspend negative criticisms, but maybe offer good critique. You already have it. And it's not the part of you that looks like the poster of metta. It's the part of you that is already real. It is what is holding your relationships together. It is where you are already getting your nutrition. And so scan through and find that and really claim how much metta you already have in your life. And plant your feet there and grow that. Cultivate that. Don't just have it happen accidentally or on the weekends. Have that be a part of your everyday. It will grow. When you recognize what it is and attend it, it really will flourish. So I want you all to scan that and claim it. And then use whatever word, whatever translation of metta you like. Loving kindness, friendship, loyal, attending, whatever works for you. Or just leave it as metta. But it's crucial. It already is crucial. You already have it. And it's crucial to recognize it and bring that into your practice so that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You need metta in your practice. You already have it. And without it, it becomes very dry and analytical, very harsh.
I'm curious when you say practice metta and meditation for yourself, is there some kind of method, a mantra, or something you actually you can tell someone that you do?
I did it for 3 months. And I started with the classical phrases and really tried to understand them. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you care for yourself. And it just wasn't accessing much for me. It go dry. And so I was encouraged to play a lot. So picture somebody and make a care package for them. What would you put in a care package for your brother or your sister or your favorite person? And I did that for a while, care packages. I wrote gratitude letters for about a week. Went back to classical phrases a lot, but whenever they got dry, what is my authentic metta and how do I access it? And playing around so that I was always accessing metta as I got to know it better and better. What would take me from where I was and have me access that feeling? There's a lot of permission to play in metta.
It's like I could definitely relate to you saying that it seemed new agey. There could be some sort of superficial contempt, sort of small, starting to analyze.
Right. Exactly. And I think that in this culture, and being male, we are all slow to cultivate metta. And we already have it. And again, it's not, don't search yourself to find the New Age version of what love and kindness and friendship would look like. It's already a part of your diet, or you would commit suicide. You would not wake up to a day if you didn't have metta already pumping in your life. So ID it. Get it. See the relationships. See it in all relationships, because it happens in all relationships, but some it's really strong. And tune into that, like tuning into a radio station. Don't just sort of whip by it, or like really tune into metta as it's already in your life. And then learn how to track it. So I've gone over on that.
A couple more minutes.
Okay, so
Question.
let's see if we can.
Just a quick question. First of all, you talked about wonderful. Thank you. As a practitioner in the Bay Area, I'm a little bit to your history from the very beginning, but you talked about how maybe some of the Buddhist communities don't address the imbalances that are in American culture as well as other Buddhist communities do. Can you talk about, very briefly, about the Buddhist communities specifically in this area, or the schools of Buddhism, really seem to address this toxic individuality that permeates his culture and tries to remedy that.
Yeah, actually, the two things come up around that. One is, now that I've completely bashed the New Age approach, we do need a whole lump of self-affirmation, and we could really pour a lot more love onto ourselves. ID the real metta, but then bring in gobs of metta. Really celebrate it, make it a priority, and stretch into it. And the stretch might feel a little funky, but if it gets a little Stuart Smalley, it's just kind of, when the pendulum's been here, it swings over. Don't carefully bring it to balance because you're afraid of that wooey side. Let it swing and notice that it'll come back around. So that's my amends to all the people I might have just attacked. Every Buddhist community working with Western students is recognizing this, and they're coming around. There's so much going on with psychotherapy and Buddhism in many, many schools, the Tibetan, Zen, and Theravadan insight schools. There's a lot of dialogue going on. And the piece I'm going to play, just because it's a lot of my temperament to play, is I don't want to merge the two, because I don't think they work well as a single approach to awakening, merging Western psychology and insight with Zen or with Vipassana. But they are great complements. And for us, they seem to be absolutely necessary to have psychological health while we're trying to actually open using these forms. So there's a lot of dialogue going on now, and it's very risky. People being very brave in having practiced for 30 years and coming out and saying, maybe some of my forest monks would not back me on this. But after 30 years, I'm confident in saying, I think the practices might do better in our culture looking like this. And so, in my community, something like Spirit Rock, they're really trying to explore modes of trying to have it be very healthy for people. Really trying to preserve the liberating pith, but exploring more with psychological wisdom how to do that. Back at IMS, where I've done most of my training, that comes in, but it's a sort of a visitor, a sort of psychological insight, because they're much more dedicated, or their dedication is towards trying to preserve more of the classical forms. So they're shifting a little more slowly, and Spirit Rock is shifting a little quicker on that. And they're good. They're good because one really is staking their claim on the pith, and the other is really staking their claim on really wanting it to work for people. And I'm somewhat aware of what's going on in other traditions, but not as much, like Zen and psychotherapy.
Tempel, you'll be around afterwards to address more questions from Sunday.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
It's been a deep blessing.
We're going to have an opportunity for some Sangha business, after which, if you could provide a blessing for us. Sure. Welcome that. Time for Sangha announcements.
Yes.
Okay.
I have two items. First, I'm the host this morning, so I'd like to welcome you all to the Buddhist Fellowship meeting. There will be some refreshments served. Feel free to help yourself to cake and also fruit. And if you use teacups, please wash them, put them back. Also, we have a Zanable up there, and that's how we pay for all the activities we have. So give generously. $5 to $8 seems to be the suggested price, but if you could put in more, please do so. If you cannot, pay whatever you can. sheet we have out there, please put your name and phone number, street address and email address so that we can stay in touch with you if you choose to do so, because we do stay in touch with you by sending you information about the group and whatnot. So please do that. And finally, if you could help put away the cushions and sabus at the end of the meeting, that would be helpful. That's the first item. And the second item, and lunch. Some people can go to lunch. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And second item is briefly our retreat, which is coming up in September. That'll be the weekend after Labor Day weekend. And so there'll be more information available probably in July.
We have a field trip planned next Sunday in the evening from 7 to 9 p.m. We're going to visit Rina Surka, who is a Buddhist nun, and her monastery is up at Dolores and 21st Street. She's going to talk about the Dhamma in daily life, so there will be a South Asian style meal, and then a Dhamma talk, and then meditation. And she always ends her things with some meditation as well. So if you want to come, let me know today, because I have to call this week and let them know how many people are going to be there for dinner. And there'll be a Dhamma bowl there as well. Be ready for that.
So you need reservations.
Yeah, today I need to get people's names. Well, we can talk afterwards. I'll get your name, so I'll have a number.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Sounds exciting. Our first Sangha field trip. Paul?
Yeah, in 2 weeks, our speaker is Lama Paladin, who's from San Rafael, and she's never been here before, and I'd like to offer her a ride. So if someone is coming from San Rafael or is willing to drive her, please let me know. I don't know if she would accept or if she needs it, but I know I don't like the idea of her driving around like the speaker a few weeks ago got lost.
Don?
Next week we'll have the opportunity after the fairs, after the tea a little bit, we'll have the opportunity to open up the letters, batch of letters that I've received recently from prisoners, asking for a variety of things. So I'd like to invite as many people as would like to sit around, that's what we're having. System for figuring out how we do it. You're not obligating yourself to do anything after you've done that. But it is an experience for you to read these letters and to see what it is that prisoners write to us about.
Thank you. Next week.
I have 5 passes for the Art Deco event show that's happening today at the Concourse in 7th and Brandon, if anybody wants to. And one more, not really Buddhist announcement. If anyone's interested in coming to an informal, fun art show, potluck garden party next Saturday afternoon in Oaklands, Scott and I are two of the 5 people who are showing their art, and we've invited lots of Billy Club people, gay friends, other friends as well. See me out there, some flyers and directions and stuff, just for fun, potluck and art thing.
George.
Yeah, it's a reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org. Also, we're looking for another moderator for the Yahoo group for GBF, as I'm reducing my involvement in that group. So if you're interested, see me afterwards.
And we stand and take one another's hands.
May each one of us sink into our own stream, the stream of our lives. As we sink in, may we have both clarity and insight, plus warmth, friendship, caring, and love. May we learn to sink and ride more in this stream than out of it. And as we follow this stream, may we invite more people in.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.